I know there's a really heated debate going on right now about body count, and specifically about a lot of guys coming out these days talking about how they want to date more modest women, or they want to date women with lower body counts, or even women who have never slept with anyone at all. And in response to that, a lot of women are either really frustrated by this or really angry. A lot of women will say things like, that's none of a man's business to know that about a woman, or it's a double standard because men think they can sleep around but that women can't, or even that our pasts don't really define us, and that if you really love someone, that you're not going to hold their past against them. I want to highlight the major issue of this debate, which I think revolves around the fact that both sides make some good points and some bad ones, but also I don't think that either side is hitting on the total truth. And I also want to share some research with you guys on this topic that I think you'll find really interesting. Before I go any further, I want to say that I know this topic is really sensitive for a lot of people, and rightfully so. It's a super personal and vulnerable issue that I think, given the fact that a lot of people are willing to talk about this stuff super openly online these days, that it can be easy to forget that this is super private, personal stuff. And so I don't want anyone to think this video is about shaming or guilting people, or even talking about my own moral stance on physical intimacy. I want it to be a video that gives you the information you deserve to know so that you can make the best relationship choices for yourself. Okay, so first off, men who say that they only want to date women who are modest or have low body counts are really just echoing what men have pursued in women who they're thinking about marrying for all of evolutionary history. This is a really important point for all women to understand, that men have evolved to value loyalty when it comes to physical intimacy in women, because this is really the only way men can ensure paternity in the children that a woman gives birth to. So what do I mean by that? Basically, men value low body counts in women as a predictor of how loyal a woman will be to that man after he commits a bunch of resources to her. And that's super important for guys, because that way they can make sure that they don't end up marrying a woman and giving her all of their time, energy, attention, financial resources, everything like that, as well as give that to her children, and then end up finding out that they were actually providing for another man's children. And so men will care that a woman is very exclusive in their choices about who they're intimate with, and particularly only with that guy, so that they can make sure they're not accidentally providing all these resources for the children of one of their direct competitors, which is another man. So we really can't fault men for desiring this quality in women that they want to get married to, because they have evolved this preference in order to protect their own reproductive fitness. That would be like faulting women for requiring a man to show real commitment to her before being willing to sleep with him. And this was really the norm for all of human history, basically until the invention of the pill, when an accidental pregnancy became super unlikely for most women. On the flip side, though, a lot of women make a great point that our pasts don't always predict our futures, that people can change, and a lot of people do. But for the women whose pasts of having a lot of different partners does predict their future behavior, I think that has less to do with their past and more to do with these deep-seated attitudes that they have about physical intimacy, and probably about marriage too. A lot of people today act like we can live this young, wild, and free single life in our 20s and maybe even early 30s and make a bunch of bad choices and just let loose, and then after many years of building those bad relationship habits, we can somehow just change overnight when we decide that we're ready for a serious relationship, and that that's not going to affect our habits and our attitudes and behaviors in that serious relationship and then in that marriage. But this is obviously just not the case. And that's where the research comes in. So there's this growing body of evidence in the social science field showing that people who have more partners that they were physically intimate with before marriage end up having higher chances of divorce once they get married. And super interestingly, one of the best studies on this topic, in my opinion, was actually released last year in the Journal of Family Issues, and it found this relationship between having more partners you were physically intimate with before marriage and greater divorce rates later after controlling for factors like sex, parental and respondent education, relationship history, age at first marriage, premarital births, premarital cohabitation, age at first physical intimacy, and even religion. That last one really shocked me. I found these findings super fascinating because I think they really fly in the face of everything that we're taught today about being intimate before marriage. Basically, the relationship between premarital physical intimacy and greater divorce rates later on existed for both men and women, which is super interesting, but also regardless of their educational background, their parents' educational background, the age at which they first got married, or even how religious they are, which this one is super huge because I think there's this stigma, and I've seen this in my comments too in previous videos, that people in religious communities are less likely to be physically intimate before they get married, and they're also really not fans of divorce, and so that might explain a lot of the relationship between the physical intimacy before marriage and divorce later on. But according to this study, that's actually not the case. So that's incredibly fascinating to me. Like I've said in previous videos, this is all correlational data. So there is no way of really drawing a causal link between these two variables. However, basically all of psychological research is correlational for ethical reasons. So we kind of just have to roll with it and do the best that we can. So what I think is going on here is that people who tend to have a more casual attitude towards physical intimacy, meaning that they're willing to sleep with someone before they get married and sleep with multiple people before they get married or even engaged, that those same attitudes are probably super related to attitudes towards marriage and divorce being less of a big deal than for other people. And so I think people who really consider physical intimacy and marriage to be huge deals, huge commitments, really life-changing events and decisions, they end up sleeping with less people before they get married, but they also end up divorcing less because they're taking that commitment super seriously. But what do you guys think about this? I would love to hear your thoughts.